Yeah, I do think it's worth pointing out that this class is the first 3-time nominee for induction. It's nothing to do with our athletic ability and 100% due to the fact that the last 2 years were canceled due to COVID. But nonetheless, I am very proud to be one of a handful of select 3-time nominees. I'd spent my childhood at Top Field watching the Scarlets, watching the Mustangs. And so, it was just one of those things. Like, I always wanted to be on that team. I wanted to emulate the players that were ahead of me. I love that mound. I love to compete. I still am to this day probably the most competitive person, certainly that I know. I remember the game I lost was actually in Helena. It was the only game that my grandmother came and watched. So we, after I lost that home game, I don't remember the specifics of the game. It was just one of those that just didn't work out. But we didn't invite her back. I would say my biggest takeaway from the Scarlets was a couple things. It was, number one, it was discipline. It was number two, doing things with purpose and always practicing with a purpose. Being disciplined about how you think about how you do things, and not just going through the motions. Gentleman defensive back is a phrase that'll be ingrained in my memory forever. Every time we did something even average, we were running to the defensive back. College was an unbelievable experience. You're playing against top-notch talent. Got to spend my winters in Hawaii and California and Arizona playing, guys that I would be later watching play in the big leagues. Met my wife at the University of Utah. That experience in baseball on my resume also helped me really start my career off. It's an honor. There's a lot of really good players that have played before me and since me, and spent some time kind of rehashing memories and looking through small clippings. Well, yeah, I did a pretty darn good career. To be affiliated with the best that have come out of there is a true honor, and I'm really humbled and blessed to be included.
My dad really grew up in that environment, playing baseball all the time, and I think that's just all he did. And he was real fortunate to be on some of the best teams that have ever come out of Billings. 58 and 60 went to the World Series and just had a absolutely phenomenal team. Of course, started with McNally and my dad and Pete Cochran, Ed Bain Jr., Wayne Bell. Just a phenomenal group of guys, and they put together some really, really good teams. And it's unfortunate they came up just a little teeny bit short in 1960 when they took second. But I still look back at that team, and I think it's probably the best baseball team that's ever come out of the state of Montana. It sounds like every once in a while they might have had a beer or two and had a good time. And, that's really most of the stories that I hear from, even when my dad was playing Legion baseball, is just, not really stories so much about the individual accomplishments or anything like that, just about how great it was to be on the team and to hang out with all your buddies. He introduced me to Coach Bain, and Coach Bain started helping me out before I even got on the Royals. And then we were fortunate enough to have Coach Bain come back and coach when I was a junior, when I was 17, and we were lucky enough to win the state championship that year. My dad's history, my two uncles, and Coach Bain were just a massive influence on me, and I was lucky to grow up in that type of a family with that background. He would always throw batting practice to me all the time. I would hit in the cage, and he would just throw to me for hours on end. And I think about it now with my kids, and I think about 15 pitches, my arm would be out of place for a week or so. But he would just keep going and going, and that's really one of the things I always heard about him, both from playing football and he was playing for the Legion team. That he had incredible arm from the outfield, and he was able to hold on to that enough to throw me hours and hours of batting practice. And if there was anything I could do, occasionally I could hit the ball. And I owe a lot of the credit for that to him.
That was the sport that I felt did the best at and truly loved. Football wasn't that good at it. Swimming was okay. It was something to do in the winter. But yeah. Baseball has always been my love. I had tried out the year before, and I wanted to play one more year of Colt ball. That was more the fun, knowing that when you got to the Scarlets, it was going to be a lot of effort. Work had to go into it to really be the best you could be. Wow, Cobb Field, that was the most beautiful field of anywhere we played, including college. That field was so spectacular. The infield, the dirt, everything about it. It was just wonderful. You'd come out and you could hear the fans, and it was a great environment. Off to the College of Southern Idaho for the first year. Couldn't throw the ball. The coach knew it going in, but he still wanted me to come. Went to the Mayo Clinic, tried to put my shoulder back together, came back, it just didn't work. So Coach Walker kept me on as a pitching coach. So for the second year, and so my 2 years, it was a 2-year school, stayed there for both years, ended up being a pitching coach. Discipline was, that's a good word for Coach Maggart. It was always a relief when we would stay in the bullpen with Joe Pertz, because Coach Maggart would leave Joe Pertz pretty much alone. And so myself and Steve Miatovich and some other pitchers, we would hang out in the bullpen with Joe Pertz. When I was a sales manager, I would often reflect back on team and the importance of it. And that was something Coach Maggart really instilled in us. I was shocked, and I began reflecting back to the days of baseball and everything that the paths that it took me down were unbelievable. The experiences and then the life learnings, which were great also.
Playing for the Royals was a great privilege for me. I just remember stepping on the field for the first time when it was Cobb Field and just thinking I was in heaven, and I was 15 years old. Yeah, it was a step up from our little pony colt field out in Warden. Let's just say there was no mosquitoes here. Funny story, after I was 14 there wasn't anything more out there to go, so I had to go try out for the Royals or the Blue Jays. I had no option. And I was this close to not doing it. I was like, I'm done. I was too scared, didn't want to come in with the AA schools in Billings, didn't know if I could compete with them. My mom actually, she didn't physically drag me out to the car, but she basically gave me the look and said, you get in the car and you're going in there. And thank God she did that. I'm not going to lie, it was scary coming in here with 100 kids trying out. The second day of tryouts, when I was 15, somehow magically I kind of got out in front of one. I hit it over the left field fence, and everybody was kind of looking at me, and I was 15. I hit a home run. The second day of tryouts, so I was like, well, not that it was the norm, but I knew I could do that. So the rest is history after that. Gary Algren was our head coach for the Royals, and Gary is still one of my best friends. He kind of prepared me mentally, more so mentally, to play for Gene Stevenson. And if anybody knows Gene, and if Gene ever watches this video, he's probably going to call me. But he was not easy to play for, but I respect him so much to this day because he taught me so many life lessons. He was hard on you. Gary was hard on you as a player, but he was hard on you because he expected a lot out of you. That was a crazy thing. I got drafted when I was a junior. Played all over the country. My first year was in Salem, Oregon. Second year was in Hagerstown, Maryland. Then I went to San Jose. Then I went back to the East Coast. I was in Connecticut there, and then back to Fresno, back to Connecticut, back to Fresno. It was fun. The good thing about Pro Ball, I was in the era when Barry Bonds was doing his thing with the home runs, so I was in big league camp with those guys. Got to see Willie Mays, hang out with him a lot. Actually got his autograph. It was cool. Everybody told me not to do it, but I just went up to him and got it. I didn't care. For me, it's a huge honor. It must mean that the Legion has thought that I've done a lot for it, but I was super excited about it. And the closer it's gotten to the ceremony here, the more I've thought about it, and it's made me reflect on what I went through with it. And that's good. I think everybody should look back and reflect on what they've been through.
After the Scarlets, went on to play junior college baseball in California. Had some other Billings guys there, which was pretty fun. So pitcher only down there. Did all right. I came to realize I had other future plans, and so came back to Montana, went to school. At the time, obviously, I loved baseball, and the plan was to continue to keep playing baseball. But as I got into education, obviously, moving up in administration was the goal. So I've loved it. Working with the students has been amazing. Senior high's got some great kids. So obviously, I love athletics, so it's a fun part of the job to come and support the kids and the school. It's awesome. I actually started on the blue side. So when I was 14, I made the Blue Jays, and that was when they were building Skyview and messed with all the boundaries, and so then I had to transfer over to the red side. My son started on the blue side, finished on the blue side, had a great experience. It's awesome to see the Legion program still continuing, you know, the excellence and building young men up. Coach Magert, awesome individual, you know, developed me as a young man. That's part of the whole program. That's what it's all about, developing the young men, more than just a game of baseball, but being a good citizen, and he's awesome at that. He's done that for years, obviously, and his success in building that pride tradition and the Legion program as well as the Scarlets. Obviously, there's a lot of young boys that would love to play baseball and don't always get that opportunity, so adding in more opportunities for kids to continue to play, it's a great thing, and I hope it develops and starts this next year. As far as being in the Hall of Fame, I tell you what, I played with some amazing guys, and this could be to anybody on that team. It wasn't just me, and it was, I couldn't ask for anything more.
Of course, I was there in a special time. You know, we had Ed Bain back and his boys, you know, Ed Jr. and Jack and Mr. Hawkins and Mr. Peterson and those guys that devoted so much time and effort to us and knew what they were doing. I mean, these guys are legends. They're legends in the game to this day. Dave McNally and Jeff Ballard, you know, at the time, Jeff was playing at that time in the majors, and, you know, he'd come into town on time off to do bullpen work, and they'd call me and I'd go get to catch him. The life lessons taught to me have carried me through law enforcement. I carried through having kids and all those things you face in life. And now I get to kind of give that back to the kids that I coach.
Your t-shirt says Mafia. Is that correct? You went from law enforcement to the Mafia?
Mafia, that's about right. I remember from a young age, you know, always wanting to be a police officer or get into law enforcement. And, you know, I was going to go into the federal agencies, but when I got into local law enforcement, I loved it so much. And I saw how the feds work that I didn't want to do that. I wanted where the action was, where the fun was, where I think I could make a difference on a ground level in my community. When we won our state championship, we were at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning against the Scarlets up in Canada. We just beat Lethbridge. The rain was off and on, so we had so many delays. I was playing center field, and I caught the last out of that game and got to contribute and those kind of things. And I just remember that ball coming in. It was kind of raining, and that ball up in the sky. And I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to miss it. And if I do, I'm just going to dig a hole and crawl in it, you know. When Team Taiwan would come in and play us, back then I got to play them a couple of times, and we played them very well. I'd gotten in trouble like a day or so before. Coach Bain sat me and didn't let me play in that big game, and I was like heartbroken. He held me accountable for my screw-ups, and I didn't get to play that game, and I remember that to this day. And that had a huge impact on me about accountability in life, and that there's consequences, and if you're going to screw up, you can't pick the consequences. It's kind of a good pay all these years later for the hard work and dedication that I put in, that my parents put in, and that the coaches and people around me put in more specifically. I mean, you can be a great player and get inducted, but not only am I inducted as an individual, but I'm inducted on a state championship team back during Ed Bain's time. And I think that above all is number one in my book.